Following is a paid presentation.
Man behind Washington's biggest mystery and how Mark Felt kept his secret for more than 30 years. Scoop of the century, how did this man beat the Washington Post on its biggest story ever? Plus, all the president's men, two of them join us live to explain why they're feeling betrayed today, Wednesday, June the 1st, 2005.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And welcome to Today on this Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm Katie Couric.
And I'm Matt Lauer. So Deep Throat turns out to be the #2 guy at the FBI, and he decided not to take his secret to his grave.
I know. You know, I love this stuff, Matt. I don't know if you were excited to hear the news as it all unfolded because, you know,
for our whole professional lives,
that's right.
This has been a secret.
That's right. And Vanity Fair magazine, I think, is pretty psyched that they scooped the Washington Post on this story. The question, who is Deep Throat, has now been replaced with the question, who is Mark Felt? Why did he agree to tell his secret now? We're going to be talking with John O'Connor, the man who broke the story. And of course, that's Woodward and Bernstein, the one that really brought the story to the nation many years ago.
Now, the family members of Mark Felt are calling him a national hero and a true patriot. Others do not agree. We're going to talk to the former Nixon speechwriter Pat Buchanan this morning, who says Felt is not a hero, he's a snake. We'll also talk to former Nixon chief counsel Chuck Colson, who says the ends do not justify Felt's means.
Also coming up, Matt, we're going to be talking to the authors of a new book all about infertility called A Few Good Eggs, what your doctors may not be telling you. And you're going to focus again on baldness?
That's right. Hair loss, a story a lot of men are thinking about. If you're thinning, if you're balding, or as the Eagle said, already gone, we're going to show you the latest surgical procedures that can help you cover your losses. And then we're going to talk to one of the biggest stars in sports anywhere in the world. David Beckham is the world's most famous footballer or soccer player. He's going to join us for an exclusive interview.
And you're going to try to bend it like Beckham out on the plaza,
well,
I understand.
Some young people are going to. I'm wearing street shoes.
Anyway, lots to get to on a busy Wednesday morning. But first, let's head to the news desk where Ann has a check of the overnight news and the latest headlines. Ann, good morning.
Katie, Matt, good morning. Good morning, everybody. As you just heard, the man known as Deep Throat is out of the shadows and into the spotlight. Now 91 years old, Mark Felt has revealed that he was Deep Throat, the confidential source during the Watergate scandal that brought down President Nixon in the 1970s. Back then, Felt was the #2 man at the FBI. Well, today's Washington Post confirms that Felt was Deep Throat and said that Felt's revelation caught reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein and others at the Post by surprise. We're going to have much more on this in just a few moments. A mosque was hit by a bomb again today, this time in Afghanistan. At least 20 people were killed in a bombing in Kandahar. The blast happened as hundreds of mourners were inside the building for the funeral of an assassinated anti-Taliban cleric. Pakistan's president says he will turn al-Qaeda's terror suspect Abu Faraj al-Libi over to the United States for prosecution. He said al-Libi has not passed on any information on the whereabouts, however, of Osama bin Laden. 2 terror suspects in the U.S. were ordered held without bail during court appearances on Tuesday. Tariq Shah and Rafiq Sabir are charged with conspiring to help al-Qaeda. Indonesia's embassy in Australia was closed today after a package was delivered there containing what officials said was a biological agent. Officials linked the incident to outrage over last week's sentencing in Indonesia of an Australian woman to 20 years on marijuana charges. Investigators say a fire that killed 8 children and a woman at a sleepover in Cleveland, Ohio last month was a case of arson. But officials say they have no motive for the fire and no suspects. A possible strike has been averted at United Airlines on Tuesday. The company and its machinists agreed in principle on a contract, and mechanics ratified their contract. And in Peru, today doctors operated on a 13-month-old girl called the Little Mermaid because she suffered from a rare condition in which her legs were fused together from her ankles to her thighs. Doctors call the delicate operation a true success. What a beautiful girl. That's so nice. It is now 7:04. Let's turn back to Katie, Matt, and I always like to hear a story of success for children.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Yeah. All right, Ann, thanks so much.
Mr. Roker breathing a sigh of relief this morning, no longer under suspicion as Deep Throat, which is good.
That's true. I didn't know that it was the case. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, today is?
Hurricane season, the start.
That's right, June 1st.
Because you just told me 50 seconds ago, but thanks.
I wanted you to be in the know. Now I want you to be in the know. And Dr. Gray has come out with his latest prediction from Colorado State. 15 named storms, averages 10 or 8 could become major hurricanes. 4 of them, I should say, major hurricanes. So it looks like, and there's some of the names. Arlene will be the first, Brett the second. Not a matter, Katie in the bunch. And that's what's going on around the... Yeah, there's a Katrina, so we could maybe... A Katrina in the waves. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Thanks, Al. Here's a look at the forecast now as we look ahead to the weekend. Look at that, 77 for the interior, 84 for Sunday. So a good-looking weekend forecast for the interior. And along the shoreline, it'll just be slightly cooler. So, you got to love a forecast like this. Today, a mix of sun and clouds. After the low clouds burn off, we'll have a high temperature of 72, and it will be about 68 at the shore. Live pictures from New Haven, where the sun's coming out, and live pictures also in New London, where the fog is back.
That's your latest weather, Matt.
All right, Al, thanks very much. On Close Up this morning, Deep Throat revealed one of the greatest mysteries of our time is now solved. The identity of the man who helped bring down President Nixon. Why now, and how did this remain a secret for so long? Here's NBC's Andrea Mitchell.
Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, blindsided by Vanity Fair's disclosure of their greatest investigative triumph.
Just follow the money.
What leaked it? Nixon, somebody in the FBI? Haldeman, yes sir, Mark Felt. Haldeman tells Nixon if we move on him, he'll go out and unload everything. Felt left the Bureau in 1973 and repeatedly. Within a year, Felt was pardoned by Ronald Reagan. Woodward repeatedly checked in with Felt, but kept their original deal not to reveal his name until he died. The Washington Post admitting today the Vanity Fair scoop had them in turmoil, raising the question if Felt, who has suffered a stroke, has the capacity to decide on disclosure, and whether his family was after money. Whatever Felt's motive, his decision to help the Washington Post unravel the mysteries of American politics and journalism, a mystery finally solved. For today, Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.
John O'Connor broke the story for Vanity Fair magazine, speaking exclusively to Mark Felt, who told him, quote, "I'm the guy they called Deep Throat." John O'Connor, good morning. Nice to see you. You write that you met a young man named Nick Jones, who I'm assuming was a friend of your daughter's.
Right.
And he told you that his grandfather was Mark Felt. When he told you that, your first reaction was, quote, "You're kidding me. Your granddad is Deep Throat." Did you know that? How did you put two and two together?
Well, I had figured for years that this fellow had to be from the Justice Department, and the only candidate that was out there was in the Justice Department was Mark Felt. It was the Justice Department investigation that was being obstructed, and the Justice Department had all the information. I figured it had to come from Justice.
Fast forward a few weeks, you're invited to go visit with Mark Felt. What was that experience like?
Well, he was a really engaging guy and very nice and mellow and humorous and a great guy. When we started talking about this fellow Deep Throat, who he had not admitted to me at the time what he was himself, he sort of stiffened. He tightened. You could just see he was sort of fighting me as I told him that I had been a prosecutor and I admired Deep Throat, and I thought he kept the Justice Department clean and incorruptible, and that was his legacy. And he sort of softened when I said that, and you could tell he wanted to hear that. And I could just look at his eyes and say that he really appreciated it.
At what point did he say to you, "I'm the guy they call Deep Throat"?
Not then. He told Joan that later. But
he never told you directly.
Oh, yes, he did.
He did.
I just wasn't the first person. He had already told his family. Joan and he
his daughter
have a mutual admiration society, and she's wonderful. She's cared for him in his old age, and that she was the one who heard it first.
He was the #2 guy at the FBI at the time. He was giving this information to Woodward and Bernstein, and I understand he was particularly concerned about how FBI personnel then and now would judge him.
Correct.
That he would be viewed as a turncoat. What did he say along those lines about that to you?
Well, I've heard him say an FBI man shouldn't act like this. I'm afraid an FBI, I'm afraid what the FBI will think if I come out. And so he said that to me. He said it to Joan many more times. And that's really what is ingrained deep in his psyche about this. And over time, the family has convinced him he's a hero and that he had to do what he had to do to keep the FBI incorruptible.
I know that his family tried to persuade him at some point to tell the story. You write that they said, quote, "Bob Woodward's going to get all the glory for this, but we could make at least enough money to pay some bills like the debt I've run up for the kids' education. Let's do it for the family." What do you think the family's motive was? Was it to make some money off this, you think?
Well, no. Let me tell you, Katie, originally that was the daughter's way of pushing her father. She was trying to get Dad to do what she wanted to do. If you read the piece, you'll see their main motivation was an heroic and permanent legacy. But that's not what Mark wanted at the time, because he didn't think he was heroic when they were talking to him. So this was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when they first started talking to him. Since that time, he's become convinced he's heroic with them, and so they're together on that. We wouldn't be coming out and doing this if it were for money, and we would be at a tabloid if that were our motivation.
Are you partially relieved the Washington Post confirmed this?
Actually, not at all, because I'm so convinced of it, I had no doubt. Many people were looking to see whether Woodward would confirm or deny. I actually am so convinced of it. If you read all that I've read, it didn't make any difference to me.
You write that you believe, quote, Mark Felt is one of America's greatest secret heroes.
Absolutely.
On a personal note, why do you admire him so much?
Because he risked a lot. He could have, he had a wonderful career. He was effectively running the Bureau. If he just let this thing go, he would have done very, very well for himself. He could have pushed on and done well, but he kept our whole system incorruptible, and I think it was so important back then in '72 when the country was so divided. And he also helped us get clean elections. Remember, a lot of Watergate was about dirty tricks. So what he did was wonderful. We take it for granted now that everything is transparent, that you can whistleblow, that everything's clean, Gene, and it wasn't necessarily so back then. And so he made sure that the country, when it came to that fork in the road, the country went the right way, and he's really responsible for it.
It's interesting, in people's lives, they sometimes have a choice.
Yeah, that's right.
And when there's a fork in the road, to do the right thing, or to maintain the status quo and not buck the system.
That's exactly what he did.
Back in the early 70s, when he had that decision before him, what tilted him on the side of doing the right thing?
He was always a person who believed that the FBI was an incorruptible crime-fighting organization, and the Nixon White House had tried to obstruct a previous investigation. So when Watergate happened, he knew exactly what was going to happen. And so I think he knew that his whole bureau depended upon this, and the country depended upon this, and he knew it right away. So he went to work.
And finally, I don't think Carl Bernstein or Bob Woodward ever envisioned themselves being, quote-unquote, scooped by some lawyer writing a piece in Vanity Fair.
Right.
How do you feel about your role in all this?
Well, I don't care about the scoop, because I'm not a journalist. I'm here to help the family. I'm here to speak for them. So I think people in New York think it's a lot better than I think it is. I'm here to help. If I can help put his legacy down as being heroic and start this conversation, then I've done something that I'm proud of.
John O'Connor, thanks so much for talking with us this morning.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it. And the article, by the way, appears in the July edition of Vanity Fair, which hits newsstands starting next week. Now, here's Matt.
All right, Katie, thank you. What do all the president's men think about Mark Felt now that his true identity as Deep Throat has been revealed? Pat Buchanan was a senior advisor to Richard Nixon. He's also the author of Where the Right Went Wrong. And Chuck Colson was President Nixon's chief counsel and often labeled his hatchet man. Guys, good morning to both of you.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Let's start good morning, Chuck. Let's start with a very quick, obvious.
Wall Street is making enormous changes. One regulatory vote, which was decided by less than a 5-0. Constructive, it has to be smart, it has to be measured. And so that was a very strong difference of opinion, I think, that existed at the commission.
And the markets today higher, and there was a halt in trading 4 minutes before the closing bell sounded. Bob.
Maria, we are still sorting out what exactly is going to be happening, but my understanding is this right now. There is going to be a reopen. However, it will be just as if it was the closing bell. At the closing bell, remember, the specialists take all the orders for the close and do one print, a single print, putting all of the orders closed together at a single price. That's the last print of the day. My understanding is that is what is going to happen. They will have the bell will ring, and all the specialists will aggregate everything into a single print. They will not have continuous trading. I'm still trying to get a final ruling on this. They have not yet made an announcement, but that is the buzz that's going through the floor. As soon as I get confirmation, I'll let you know.
All right, Bob, thanks. We'll be back to you certainly on that story. Meantime, we haven't even told you about the markets today, but
The closing bell continues. Once again,
Maria Bartiromo.
Welcome back. Now the markets, where the question of the day is, our President Richard Fisher told us the Fed is in the 8th inning on a 9-inning game. That and some weaker than expected numbers on manufacturing helped send the Dow higher today. Take a look at where we ended the day, with the Dow up 81.5 points, 10,549, even with oil prices up more than $2 a barrel. That helped the oil stocks. It did not cut into the overall strong market rally. NASDAQ also stronger, it too finishing pretty strongly, although it was off of the best levels of the afternoon. NASDAQ up nearly 20 points, about 1% higher on the day, finishing the day at 2,087. One of the reasons, take a look at internet company Google. It was on fire yet again today. CSFB took its target price on the stock up to $350 a share. Heavy volume there. The stock up another 3 3/4%. $10 higher at $287.60. S&P 500 also on the rise today, finishing near the high of the day with a gain of about 1%, 10 points higher at.
Here was for a while. Lonesome, meaning has his own views, may not necessarily reflect those of the FOMC.
And the get to 4%, so clearly higher than what the market's looking at now.
New York Stock Exchange, as you know, trading was halted 4 minutes before the closing bell was to ring. Bob Pisani tells us the exchange is planning to reopen for 4 more minutes of trading. You'll have it here live on the closing bell. When we come back, the biggest market-moving interview of the day, probably the week, a replay of the complete Richard Fisher interview on Closing Bell. Stay with us.
Today, a soldier sees a snapshot of
Trading at the New York Stock Exchange was halted today at approximately 3:56 Eastern Time due to communications problems. We're hearing the exchange will open imminently.
Tonight on
Welcome back. It has been a busy news day on Wall Street today. The New York Stock Exchange saw trading halted. The exchange halted trading, at 4 minutes before the closing bell sounded. Bob Pisani reporting just a few moments ago that the exchange is expected to redo trading. Bob is on the floor with an update. Bob?
And we are waiting for further instructions right now. John Thane is over with all of the team and many of the head traders and floor officials just about 100 feet from me, trying to determine what they should do. Now, here is what probably will happen, Maria. There will be a closing bell rung, and there will be a final print. At the closing bell every day, all of the traders who have market on close orders get a single print from the specialist. That is a single price at which the stock closes, and everybody gets that price at the close. Most likely, that is what will happen. There will not be continued